And I just want to thank my Boss Babes fanatics. Thank you guys so much for tuning in each and every episode. You guys know that I drop about 4 brand new lifestyle sports podcast episodes a month. I chat with some of your favorite professional athletes, their significant others, and reality TV competitors. And of course, I fill you guys in on all of my personal updates, whether that's baseball, cooking dinner, hanging out with my dog, and so much more. You guys have been loving me updating you all on my wedding details. Please leave me a fun review. It allows me to keep putting out that fire content for you guys. So I just want to hop right into it. This week, our special guest is a mom, an entrepreneur, and an NFL wife. Please meet Mrs. Danielle Landry. How are you, girl?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be here and talk to you.
I am so thrilled to have you on here. So before we even started recording, her and I kind of like chatted for 5 minutes. And I find it really cool that not only did she spend time in the Boston area because her and her hubby apparently went to Boston College. You guys, my listeners, know that I'm from the Boston area. It's really cool to connect with other people in the sports industry. So I'm thrilled to have you on. And just to break the ice, if you had a superpower, what would it be and why? And it could be multiple superpowers if you wish.
Okay. So my kids and my husband and I really like superheroes. So we've talked about this before. But I think that my husband would want to say like Elastigirl, like that stretchiness, and he would probably say Mr. Incredible would be his thing. But I think that I would probably like to fly because I always say that if I was to come back as an animal, I'd want to be like an eagle, like a bald eagle, like the total apex predator of the sky. So I would probably say flying would be pretty cool.
I think that's an awesome superpower. And I find it very cool that you and your family have already had this conversation. How old are your kids? I know we're going to be talking about them later on in this episode, but I know one of your sons, it looks like, plays baseball. And you have another son, a daughter?
I actually have 2 boys. So yeah, my older one is Grayson. He actually turns 5 next month. He does play t-ball. It is quite interesting. This was his second season, definitely improved from the first. Not sure if baseball is his thing yet, but we're going to give him a little more time for that. And then my younger son is Ollie, and he is 2.5. So he's not quite old enough to get into stuff, but he is very like physically advanced and does everything his brother does. So I'm sure he is going to be front in line to start sports as soon as he's old enough.
So adorable. And stay with us, guys. You are going to be hearing all things from Danielle. Her husband is currently in the NFL. His name is Harold Landry III. So we're going to be talking a little bit about his career, a lot about Danielle and what she's been up to, and a little bit about their family. Of course, this is a lifestyle sports podcast, so I like to give you guys a little bit of everything. And on top of that, my girl actually started her own custom company where you guys can actually head to her website and be able to order some custom sports clothing for your favorite teams. So we're going to hop into all of that. But first and foremost, where did you grow up and where was your family from? Like, what are some of your top memories, the whole shebang?
So I'm from Connecticut originally, but half my family lives in Connecticut and then the half lives in New York. So I kind of split time between the two. And also my mom's actually from England. That's where she was born and raised. So she's actually the only person on her part that lives in America, and then everybody else lives in England. So I used to go back there like every summer for the whole summer, which was so fun to just spend time with that side of the family. My mom always said that like when I came back from like 6 weeks abroad that I had a British accent, but then, I went back to school and lost that immediately, unfortunately. Yeah, that was probably one of the, really core memories is taking those trips and spending time abroad. And I just can't wait for my kids to get a little bit older so that they can have those same experiences and go. And there's, they have cousins abroad that they don't really even know because they don't have the opportunity to go there. I mean, I probably could take them now, but the thought of like being on a plane for like 12 hours with 2 young kids is just not appealing for me quite yet. So I want to wait a little bit until they're older. But yeah, so I grew up in Connecticut. I went to a private school. It's called Cheshire Academy, and I love it there. I have all of like my best friends came from that school and we're still friends now. And just really good relationships I had from that school in general with faculty too. So I'm very thankful for being able to grow up there. But now as an adult, like we live in Tennessee, and I much prefer living in the South as to living in the North. Like it's nice, it's nostalgic to go back and visit, but I don't think I would want to live there now.
I think that's incredible that you actually grew up in Connecticut. I know you and I just lightly discussed it, but I'm also from the New England up north area, and I won't fully get into it because a lot of my listeners already know that I'm from the Boston area. But I always find it super cool knowing that there's like so many different countries in the world, so many different states just right in the US, and the amount of people that I have on my podcast that either A, like grew up in like the northern part of the US, or B, went to college there. It kind of makes me feel like it's such a small world, and I think it's amazing. Pretty cool that you also went to a private school. Did you play any sports while you were there?
I did. My two main sports were field hockey and lacrosse. I really enjoyed both of those. I was captain my junior and senior year of both. It definitely was something like, especially with lacrosse, I thought about, seeing what it might be to do college stuff. I went to a camp at, was it Northwestern, I think it was. And I very quickly realized the level of skill that those people had there and, the girls at the time. And I just don't know if like the schools that we played against were just quite to the caliber. So, maybe I could have been one of the better there, but then when you open it up to the whole country, it's a very different conversation. So I definitely really enjoyed them. And I mean, team sports are the best in general. Like I always think back to high school and think that the high schoolers now probably take it for granted because, team sports for most people don't last forever. High school can be it. And it's just such an amazing experience, and those relationships you have with your teammates and just being able to travel and play games and have practices after school and all of that. And then you miss it after it's over. But yeah, I did really love doing those both. And I did some basketball for a little bit too. I am 5'10", so people always assume that I'd be like basketball and volleyball because, they want tall girls for that. But I don't know, I just didn't gravitate towards those as much as the other two.
Holy cow. First off, I had no clue that you're a 5'10" girl. That is incredible. So between you and your husband, I mean, I don't know how tall your husband is, but if he's in the NFL and I believe he's a linebacker, he must be pretty tall too, maybe somewhere in the 6-foot range. Mm-hmm. You guys, your kids are probably going to be pretty tall and pretty athletic. That is amazing. Did you ever model when you were younger? I mean, you're gorgeous, and being that tall, did that ever cross your mind? This just popped in my head because you mentioned how tall you were.
I know it was something that my mom was probably more interested in than I was at the time. We did a couple things, just dabbled in it here and there, but I am not great with photos. Like my husband isn't either. We're like, whenever we go somewhere, we're not the people that think to like, oh, let's capture the moment and take a picture of ourselves. Like, it's just not us. We just get so uncomfortable in front of the camera. So I think that was probably my problem, because there was definitely some opportunities, and especially being in the Northeast, like you're so close to New York and that's such a hub for modeling. So we just didn't really capitalize on that opportunity. But my older son, a few years ago, we did try in some of like the modeling, acting stuff for him too. And I think he probably just follows in his parents' footsteps and wasn't quite as into it. But he's just he has such beautiful skin and hair that I was like, oh my gosh, we should capitalize on this. But yeah, he wasn't into it either. So we tried, but it's not for us.
You mentioned that you grew up in Connecticut. You kind of described being involved in field hockey and lacrosse. We will talk a little bit about that shortly. What are some of your other top childhood memories? Did you guys go on vacations? I don't know if you mentioned, do you have any brothers or sisters? Who are you closest to? Did you guys make anything special around the holidays? Paint the picture for who was Danielle super young growing up in Connecticut, pre-kids, pre-husband.
People rarely ask about those things. That's funny that you bring it up. Well, I did grow up in like a broken household. So my parents were not together. My mom, when I was about 5, she met my stepdad, and he's amazing. And he had 2 children from a previous relationship. So my older brother and my older sister are in their 30s. So they were always like, a little bit older. I was, 5 and they were in high school type of thing. We didn't necessarily grow up super close then. Now as we're adults and, our lives are a little bit more similar. We're closer now. But then on my dad's side, he had another son later on too. And my younger brother is 14. So again, it's like the same age difference in the opposite way. So I've always had a very maternal bond to my younger brother. I just always want to take care of him because I am the older sibling. But it's just hard too when you're so far away because they're still back in, Connecticut, New York, and teenage years can be very difficult, especially for a boy. So it's harder to make that connection now. But hopefully as he gets older, it's going to get a little bit easier. But as a kid, I would just travel back and forth between my parents, which can be hard for anybody who, spends time in two different households. But I'm just very grateful too for the relationship that I have with my stepdad because, he was a big impact in raising me because I did primarily live with my mom and him. So I'm just very grateful for the opportunities that he afforded me, growing up and even being the ability to go to private school and do that. I did get a scholarship for middle school. And then for high school, they basically I was paying for virtually nothing because my mom just couldn't afford it. My mom and I, when she was single and when I was super young, we lived with her friend Carmen and her daughter Elizabeth, and it was a 2-bedroom little tiny condo. And my mom and I shared a room and slept in the same bed, and her mom and her slept in the same bed in the other room because they couldn't afford anything. My mom always tells me how she would have to make a pot of sauce, and that would have to feed all of them for the whole week. And I think now about how blessed and privileged I am now. My kids don't have to worry about that, but the stresses that our moms had to deal with when we were younger and trying to support us and make sure we had clothes and shoes and could go to the good schools and all that and work 3 jobs just to, be able to give us, the basic needs. So it was a little bit harder in the beginning there. And then obviously when my mom met my stepdad, having that more nuclear family, it improved in that sense. But I'm really grateful for all of it. I feel all the good and the bad experiences have really taught me a lot. And now that I'm an adult and a parent, I'm able to reflect on those experiences and see how I want to incorporate certain things into how I raise my kids.
Well, first off, thank you so much for sharing all those intimate details about your upbringing. I'm sure some of the listeners are appreciative of you being so raw and real and open because I myself kind of grew up. I like to say to people, my parents have been together since they were 14, but I would also say, although they were together, it was basically like a broken home because they always fought, they always argued, they were together for so long, and now they're actually currently separated. They've had their ups and their downs because again, they've been together for 40 something years. I actually think their wedding anniversary is coming up. But the reason why I bring this up is to be able to have these conversations and to be real and to be open. And a lot of people can relate to those types of situations. So thank you so much for opening up about that. And I really liked the fact that you opened up about now your kids might not have to struggle as much. So I find that very interesting as well, that I feel like every generation does as best as they can for their kids. And our goal is I don't have kids yet, but at some point do better for the next generation. So again, thank you for sharing that. Before we wrap up talking about your childhood, and then I want to switch back over into the sports talk, are there any other memories in particular? I know you talked about your family making sauce and having to stretch that. Were there any fond memories that you guys had, whether that be during Christmas or Thanksgiving, anything special you guys did as far as staying local or traveling?
So I actually have another sauce memory, just coincidentally. This is a different one. But my stepdad's side, Michael, every year, he's Italian, so his whole family is Italian, and every year, right around Labor Day weekend, the whole family comes together at somebody's house, and we make tomato sauce from scratch, straight up the tomatoes, they be cooking them in bags, straining them, you take out all the bad bits, and we make cases, hundreds and hundreds of cases of sauce, and it all gets divided up amongst each of the members of the family, and that case or cases of sauce, however many you need for your family, that's your sauce for the year. So totally a different sauce thing, but that was a very positive memory. I used to love doing that every single year. I mean, it's a lot of hard work for sure. It was a lot of work between that and then my mom was like in charge of the kitchen, and she would make this massive, my mom's an amazing cook, but she would make this massive pasta spread on the last day of the weekend, so that way everybody could enjoy all of the sauce that everybody was working so hard all weekend to make. So that's like one of my like core memories too. That was just so positive, and just coincidentally is about tomato sauce again. But maybe I just really like sauce. I don't know.
I want to switch on over and discuss the fact that you are highly involved in sports. And again, thank you so much for sharing so much about your childhood. I'm sure my BosBabes fanatics fully loved enjoying learning a little bit about your childhood. You guys are now listening to Danielle Landry. She is a mom, entrepreneur, and she is actually the wife to Harold Landry III. He currently plays for the Tennessee Titans. So maybe you will hear Danielle talk a little bit about spending some time in Tennessee. I don't know if they live there in the off season, but obviously in season, they probably live somewhere in that vicinity. You already talked a little bit about playing field hockey and lacrosse. Are there any other sports that you played? I know you mentioned basketball. Did you watch any sports as a kid? And were there any athletes that you looked up to in your younger years?
I don't know if I necessarily looked up to any athletes in particular. I mean, I, like to try different sports and see what I enjoyed. And like in terms of football, we grew up and I was a Giants fan, New York Giants fan. So that's what my stepdad enjoyed. And by default, that's kind of what I grew up watching and with him, but not that I was very knowledgeable at the time. It took until I met my husband for me to actually like understand the sport of football. And then, same with like baseball. Like I grew up a Yankees fan, so I just always liked those two. And then when I did play basketball, I really liked, because obviously I'm from Connecticut, like the UConn women's team has dominated, college basketball for so long. So I would go to those games too every now and again. So that would probably be like the extent of it. I wasn't ever like, a fanatic towards a particular team or person. I just kind of dabbled in a bunch of different ones.
I feel like a lot of my listeners, they like to get inspired by hearing other women talk about sports, which is a big reason why I actually started this podcast to begin with, is to get women obviously more involved in sports, to have a voice, to talk about all of the things sports related, whether that be playing the sport, starting your own company like yourself, coaching. Danielle actually went to school in the Boston area for college. I believe she went to Boston College, and that's actually where she met her husband. But before we even talk about how she met her husband and how he proposed and all of those good things, girl, discuss college. What was it like for you? What made you decide to go to Boston College? And what did you study there?
Okay, so I feel like I'm an academic for sure. So I worked really hard in high school. BC was always like in my top 3 for where I would want to go. And, it's relatively close to my parents' house. It was only a couple hour drive. So it just kind of made sense in order for me to be able to come home too. Boston College's campus is like absolutely beautiful, like the tall, like cathedral type buildings. And it was just so beautiful. And I always liked the idea of a college campus that was, exactly that. Like it was a campus and it wasn't one that was like built into the city. So like I obviously went and saw, Boston University when I was there, but I just didn't really love how spread apart it all was. It looked too much like the city. And I liked that BC was very, very much so like one unit. College was interesting. So fun fact, I actually got pregnant my sophomore year of college. So I really only had that 1 year of, that typical college experience. I met my husband towards the end of my freshman year, and we got pregnant very quickly. So my whole sophomore year, I was that pregnant girl who was walking to class with her belly all growing all year. I got pregnant in the end of August going into sophomore year. I didn't find out until like the first week of October. And then I literally went to school every single day until I did my final exams, and I like gave birth three weeks after my final exams in the spring. So I took no days off. I wanted to make sure that I was still going to school. I took some more night classes so I wouldn't necessarily have to see as many people during the day, because I was like, I'm literally the only pregnant girl on campus right now. And plus, BC is a Jesuit school, so it was probably frowned upon to, be pregnant in school But I was like, there's no way I'm just not finishing the year. I was like, I got pregnant right at the beginning. I was like, I can totally get through this entire year. And it was tough. And some of my professors, especially the second semester when I was like 9 months pregnant and ginormous, were like, do you want to take your exams like in the summer after you give birth? I was like, no, I am not going to remember any of this stuff, nor am I going to want to take any exams after I push this baby out. I was like, I'm taking them now, and I'm going to go home, I'm going to rest a little bit, and then I'm going to deliver my baby.
I think that is incredible. And again, I had no idea about any of this. So you being so open to my listeners, I applaud you, because it is giving some of these listeners like the opportunity to be like, okay, no matter what is thrown at me, I can get through this. Like, I fully love the fact that you were like, no, like, I'm going to take my exams, I'm going to stay in school, I'm going to get through this, and then I will go ahead and deliver my baby. So all the power to you.
I was 19 when I got pregnant, yes. And I had my son like 3 days before I turned 20, because his birthday is June 5th and my birthday is June 8th. So I was like right on that cusp of not being a teenager anymore. But we got engaged when I was pregnant, like in January. So we had been together for about 7 months when we got engaged.
Were you able to finish up your degree having had a baby and only being able to complete 1 or 2 years of school? Or if you didn't, are you going to potentially go back or do online classes?
Oh, girl, I finished. I did it. That was one of my biggest things, is that I know there are a lot of negative stereotypes around, teen moms, young moms, about just like not progressing themselves and, kind of just focusing on their children, which is huge. And, everybody to each their own. But I have always been so focused on school that I was like, I'm not going to fall into these stereotypes that people have, expecting me to fail and expecting me not to finish because now I have a baby. So I actually finished on time. So I had taken, because of the unsure feeling that we had about Harold and where his career was going to take him, whether it was school related or NFL, I was like, it's just easier for me to be online. So I transferred after my sophomore year. Like once I gave birth and everything, I went to Penn State's World Campus. So it was their online campus. And I did summer classes, fall classes, spring semester classes all year round for the next 2 years to make sure that I would graduate on time, so I could just take a part-time schedule but take 3 semesters worth throughout the year, because that was a big thing for me. I was like, I want to graduate and I also want to graduate on time, and this is just going to push me to work harder. And yes, I have a son, but doesn't mean that I can't still accomplish my goals. So my goals changed because I went into BC pre-med. And when I found out I was pregnant my sophomore year, I was like, okay, these classes are going to get a little bit too aggressive for what I think I can manage. So I ended up switching and being a social sciences psychology major and doing that route because it just made a little bit more sense. And that way, and a lot of my credits were able to transfer to Penn State's World Campus to allow me to continue and graduate on time. But yeah, it was really hard. And I had a really nice graduation party at the end because I worked my ass off for 4 years to get there. And I'm just really grateful for everything that happened, because I think it was a lot of good lessons that I learned throughout those experiences.
Well, congratulations on being able to juggle not only being engaged fairly young, married now, of course, with the house. You guys are both very successful. You already mentioned you have 2 kids now. If you have any advice for the listeners that might be pregnant young or have already had a child young, what advice would you give to them to push through any adversity or any changes that might come their way? Especially like you said, you kind of, people think that it's a negative thing when you get pregnant young. Whereas back in the day, I found it interesting because back in the day, that was like the norm, right? Like think about our grandparents. Everybody freaking had kids at age 17, 18, 19. Nowadays, myself included, here I am 33 with no kids, because you think the right thing to do is to go to college and to do this and to do that. But to each their own, like whatever step and whatever your journey is, just push through it. So if you had any advice for somebody that might have a kid young and they're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next? What would you say to them?
I think the biggest thing is to have faith in yourself, because ultimately you are in control of how you perceive the situation. this is your life and nobody's going to live it for you. And I think that was a big thing for me. It's like, I could be upset. I can pity myself. I can say all these things. Why did this happen? But why? Because what is that really going to accomplish? Nothing. Like, you're just going to make yourself feel worse. And it's going to be hard. Like everything in life is hard. And, the best things in life are hard. And that's okay. It's just a matter of you putting in the work to create the life that you want to have. And that's just going to take time. And I always tell people that we have a very blessed situation, and it unfortunately doesn't unfold the same way for everybody. A lot of people who do have children young aren't necessarily still with the parents, the baby's father, or whatever the situation might be, or we're in a very, comfortable financial place. So I never say take my experience and expect that it's going to become your experience, because it's not true. But you're in control of your path and the way you perceive that path. And I'm a big believer in God and his influence on your life. But I also believe that you make your own decisions as well, and that God has a hand in your life and a hand on your path. But I want people to know that they should still make the effort to create that life that they're looking for.
And that is some beautiful advice. You guys are now listening to Danielle Landry. She is the wife to Harold Landry III. He now currently plays for the Tennessee Titans. You guys are listening to her talk all about going to college, going to Boston College, busting her booty, getting her degree while being pregnant young. And I think it's an incredible story. Now that we're on the topic of college and getting pregnant and I guess sort of meeting your husband, let's hop right into it. So Danielle is an NFL mom and wife. We just talked about it a few times, but she is married to Harold Landry III. Harold's played football at Boston College, which obviously that's where Danielle started off her college life. He was a second-round pick in the 2018 draft by the Tennessee Titans. His position, he plays outside linebacker. So I had written down here, how did you guys meet? So I'm just going to toss it out. Obviously, it was at college. Was it out at a bar one night? Did you guys have classes together? Was it at a football game? Did somebody set you guys up? How the heck did you and Harold meet?
So I did work for the football team. So I worked in their video department. So basically I would just video all practices and games. And then I worked with some other students, and we had a couple of, adults who were actually paid to do it. And we would edit everything so that all the guys and all the coaches had everything on their iPads. So that was my job. It wasn't something that I was super passionate about necessarily, but I needed to work steady in college to make some money. And I always, had an interest in sports, and I thought it would be a good way of meeting people. So that's why I ended up there. But I obviously did meet some people through that and some mutual friends. And I think we met. I never really remember these stories, but I think we met. There was a party at, it was called the Basketball House, because BC doesn't have Greek life. So if there were any parties, it had to be athlete parties, because there was no frats or sororities. And I just have this distinct image in my mind of him. He looked very different than he looks now, but he's always had his chest tattoos. And he was wearing a wife beater and with his chest tattoos out. And he went by the name Tony, because his middle name's Antonio. And he always tells me that he didn't want the girls to necessarily know his name was Harold, because they couldn't bring it back that he was Harold from the football team, etc. So he went by Tony. And I actually tried to set him up with one of my roommates at the time, but I don't know, we both decided to stay over the summer because I wanted to take a class. And then also I worked for Residential Life in the summer. I got a full-time job with them. So not a lot of people in general stay on campus over the summer. So it was just a select group of us. And he was one of them, because he wanted to be able to focus on football and training. And he felt like if he went home for the summer, he might get distracted by his home friends. So, he would come to all of my shifts. Sometimes I would work 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. shifts, and I'd have to walk the halls of the dorms. And he would do it with me, or he would go to the store and bring me food. He was just so sweet. And I'm I felt like I had almost sworn off, guys. I just wanted to focus on myself. I had ended a relationship that I had brought into college from high school. And I was this is the time for me to just focus on what I want to do. I was working 3 jobs over the summer, and I just didn't really want a relationship at that point. And I feel like people always say that it's, those things that you least expect that ended up being so great, because neither of us was looking for that. And we ended up just casually spending so much time together, and it just very, very quickly became something more. And we always say, like, it seems like one of those Nicholas Sparks movies or books, if you read the books, because it's like this whirlwind summer romance. And thankfully it all worked out in the end because we're still together. But it was just like so much like love and passion and feeling all at once in the beginning, and it has extended this whole time. So it's been a really nice love story.
I guess my big question is, it sounds like you guys obviously developed a really good friendship at the beginning. So who asked who on the first date? Did you guys ever have like an official date, or is it more so just him being like, okay, babe, I'm going to come hang out with you at work for a little bit. I'm going to bring you lunch. Was there ever like an official, hey, let's go on a movie date? Or did it just kind of like blossom out of nowhere like you're talking about? And based off of who asked who on the first date, what did you guys do on your first date, if you guys went on a first date back in college?
Okay, so we had gone out to this like beach, and one of his friends, he brought a girl, and we were just sitting on the beach, and we had these like Smirnoff ices. I'm not saying that you should be underage drinking at all, but that's what was happening. And we were just sitting on the beach, and after he was sipping for a while, he had all these like feelings that were being brought out, and I was like, what? I was like so caught off guard. And I knew I felt that way, like I felt that little butterfly feeling, but I was like, I'm just so surprised that you're like saying this to me right now. And then once we like had this conversation, it was kind of like this breakthrough of like, you know, moving from that friend zone into maybe something more. And then for my birthday, he actually took me out to this place called Top of the Hub, which I'm sure you know of because it's in Boston. It's like this rooftop restaurant on one of the taller buildings there. And at that point, like, that's expensive and that's like really nice. And I was like, you don't have to do all that. And he took me to dinner for my birthday, dressed up all nice. We both did. And I feel like that was like the first date. And when we had our son Grayson, like Harold was still in college at that point, finishing up his last year. And it was so surreal to like go back. I went to visit him when our son was like 6 weeks old or something. I drove with him up there, and we went to Top of the Hub like with our baby. So it was like a full circle moment of like our first real date being there, and then like to bring our baby there, you know, a year and a half later.
Oh my gosh, that is such a cute story. I'm so glad that I asked that. And again, you just mentioning the Top of the Hub. I don't know if it's still there or not. I haven't been to the Top of the Hub in a long time. But for those of you guys that are listening, as Danielle just mentioned, Top of the Hub, yes, it is very expensive. They only let a certain amount of people go in at a time because it's actually like a smaller restaurant, but very nice. I believe it's located in the Prudential building. People from Boston call it the Pru. It is very tall, as Danielle mentioned. And what's super cool about the Top of the Hub, and again, you guys can go ahead and Google it. It may or may not still be there. But if you sit down and order dinner, and if you're there for a couple hours, if I remember correctly, again, it's been a while since I've been there. Danielle can correct me if I'm wrong. But depending on where you sit and if you're by the window, supposedly you will see different views of Boston because the Top of the Hub actually moves around. Danielle, do you remember that? Again, I haven't been there in a while.
I think you're right. I think it does like slowly rotate.
At what point did you know or think that he was the one? And again, you guys started off with the friendship. I find it very interesting that you mentioned you almost tried to set him up with one of your friends, and I'm sure you would have been kicking yourself in the butt if they ended up dating and not you guys. So at what point did you think you and Harold were going to be like it? Like that was it. He's the guy.
Oh, very fast. Like super fast. That's part of why we attribute it to like being, you know, like a book or a movie, because we both felt things like really fast. And I think that he might have felt it a little faster because he did say, I love you, like maybe 2 weeks in. Like that could be a stretch. Like it might have been before the 2 weeks mark. And I remember feeling like, you know, I feel like there is a love, but like, I don't know if I'm ready to say it. I said it because I didn't want to like him to feel bad. And I knew that there was like something strong there, but I was like, that just seems fast for me. It all worked out. And, you know, if I didn't fully mean it, then I fully meant it very soon after that point, because we were just like very sure. And even like when we found out we were pregnant, that's just a very difficult decision to make. And I don't want to make it seem like, oh, no matter what, we were having the baby. Like, no, we wrote out multiple pros and cons list, and the cons far outweighed the pros because, you know, we're both in school. We'd been together for like 3 months. We didn't know what was coming next. We didn't really have any money. There was just so many different factors that were working against us. But the thing that we were most solid about was our relationship, in terms of we knew how we felt about each other, even if everybody else, you know, was chirping in our ears and, you know, didn't necessarily feel like maybe this would work out. We were very sure of ourselves and our relationship. And we felt like once we went to the ultrasound and we saw, you know, our baby and we heard the heartbeat and everything, we're like, we can make it work. We're going to find a way. It's going to be hard, but this is what we want to do. We want to be together. And this is just, you know, God's plan for us. And this is what he wants. And we're going to find a way to make it work.
That is such a beautiful story. And I haven't had a story like this yet on my podcast. And I've been doing this for about 2 years now. So again, I applaud you for being so very real, raw, and open. And my BosBabes fanatics, I hope you guys are enjoying this episode, because again, this is the first story I've had on here like this ever. And I love hearing it because it is a positive story where these two young people in college meet, fall in love very quickly. The dad is still in the life, which is a beautiful thing. They're still together. It looks like they have a gorgeous home. I can only see a little bit of their house right now, but it looks like she has a very well-organized closet, which I'm obsessed with.
This is actually my office. This is where I do like all of my work stuff. Like I have like a million things up here. It is very organized right now because I just finished a bunch of orders and they're all packaged away in the corner ready to go to USPS. So it's a little more organized than usual.
I love it. And I cannot wait for you guys to hear all about the business that she started. It's called My Dani Design. She's the founder, and it's all custom sports clothing. And I'm probably going to be ordering some stuff from her as well, because you guys know I'm all about the sports life. Fiance plays professional baseball, so I'm gonna need some custom swag, maybe even some stuff for my honeymoon, wink wink.